Friday's Child, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. July 26th, 1985. 3:45 a.m., Oak Grove, Mississippi. Joseph Mincer was born. His Aunt Deidre brought a cross-stitched wall hanging with a Mother Goose rhyme on it, proud of her new nephew that had just been born on a Friday and all that he might be. Monday's child is fair of face. Tuesday's child is full of grace. Wednesday's child is full of woe. Thursday's child has far to go. Friday's child is loving and giving. Saturday's child works hard for a living. But the child born on the Sabbath day is fair and wise and good and gay. Friday's child is loving and giving. In preschool, Joseph stole an eraser for a girl. Not just any girl, and not just any eraser. She was Jenny, Joseph's first girlfriend. Their 4-year-old romance consisting of lying by one another at naps, painting together during art, and watching Sesame Street together while having juice boxes. The eraser was a small green pterodactyl pencil topper that was looking to the left when you were facing it. It had that neat 1980s ineffable eraser smell. He was caught, of course. At 4, he was far from a master thief. Plus, he was quick to admit his wrongdoing, though he did explain that the theft was predicated to make someone else's life better. Jenny needed the pterodactyl for her pencil during drawing time. The women at the preschool thought it cute. He and Jenny were punished. They were put in the corner together, but they still got their cran grape juice boxes and were allowed to peek around the corner during Sesame Street. This had been a selfless act on Joseph's part, after all. And who were they to stop young love? In kindergarten, Joseph loaned his supplies out to his table mates without hesitation. In Miss Hanover's class, he sat with Stephanie and Sasha Maronian, twins from across town. The other boy that sat with him was named Joseph McLaren. This drove Joseph's mother crazy because she'd written Joseph M. on all of his supplies, right down to the individual pencils and crayons. This labor was done for 10 parts love and 2 parts practicality. His mama adored him, and they were too poor to buy more supplies. The classroom was He-Man and She-Ra themed, and Joseph, Stephanie, Sasha, and he were lucky enough to get the titular character of He-Man as their table name, color, and theme. The girls were just as excited as the boys. He-Man was the coolest table in the room, and it was all theirs. The only annoying part of their amazing luck was other Joseph, as the twins came to know Joseph McLaren. The girls teased other Joseph from day one. He cried when his mommy left. His nose got snotty while he was crying. He licked the snot. A lot. He ate his glue and his paste when they started arts and crafts. He couldn't color in the lines. He couldn't tie his shoes. He peed his pants twice in the first week of school. The girls teased other Joseph, but Joseph never did. First of all, he never called him other Joseph either. In reality, other Joseph preferred to be called Jay. So, Joseph called him just that. Joseph showed Jay his stuffed raccoon Rocky from the cartoon The Shirt Tales to make him stop crying. Joseph gave Jay a packet of tissues to help him with his snotty nose. Joseph gave Jay some extra glue after all of his had been eaten, and it was time to put more macaroni on his name during arts and crafts. Joseph told Miss Hanover that Jay was trying out a new form of outlining when he'd colored outside the lines. She didn't buy it, but Joseph still tried to help his table mate out. Joseph tutored Jay in the art of tying one's shoes. Joseph spilled his afternoon drink to try to cover up the fact that Jay had peed in his seat right there in the classroom. Both times. The apple juice didn't quite cover up the scent of the urine, but it was enough of a distraction to save Jay at least a few pairs of judgy 4 to 6-year-old eyes. Joseph's life continued on in waves of anecdotes just like these, until he moved to Shale City in 7th grade. Shale City is what first began to chip away at this Friday's child. The 7th graders in Shale City were rich, entitled. Worst of all, mean. Joseph learned how to take a punch in Shale City. He learned what brands were, and that they seemed to matter to almost everyone but him in Shale City. He learned that you could be ostracized and even physically hurt because of how you looked, what you believed, or for no reason whatsoever in Shale City. He learned that the color of someone's skin could preclude you from being their friend or them from being yours. This perplexed him more than most of the lessons he learned there in Shale City. Lesson after lesson after lesson shook and pushed and cut at his faith in God, faith in himself, and faith in humanity. By 30, Joseph had run the gamut in the variations on who and what he was. 7th grade to 30 saw him be a womanizer, a feminist, a lover, a fighter, an athlete, a sloth, a hard worker, a homeless man. Joseph had been damn near everything and everyone he could be. Because he couldn't let go of his dreams of being a star of some sort, Joseph had a little hobby room with musical instruments, recording equipment, a writing desk, and all the trappings of a someday star. In that room, he had hung the labor of love that Aunt Deirdre had given him as a moments-old infant, that cross-stitched wall hanging bearing the Mother Goose rhyme. Every single day, he read that poem once, always pausing on his cross-stitched fate when he arrived at that point of the sing-songy poem. Monday's child is fair of face, but Friday's child is loving and giving. Tuesday's child is full of grace, but Friday's child is loving and giving. Wednesday's child is full of woe, but Friday's child is loving and giving. Thursday's child has far to go, but Friday's child is loving and giving. Friday's child is loving and giving. Saturday's child works hard for a living, but Friday's child is loving and giving. But the child born on the Sabbath day is fair and wise and good and gay. Still, that is nothing compared to Friday's child. Friday's child is both loving and giving. Friday's child is loving and giving. His entire life, Joseph let those words haunt him, allowing them to reverberate in everything that he did, Everything that he was, even more importantly, it whispered and sung and shouted and called out to him as to what he was not, particularly during the darker times in his life. Maybe more accurately, it was calling out what he was and then was no longer. His loving nature had been wrung out of him by a cynical and harsh world. He hadn't given anything without thought of what it would do for him and what he'd get out of it in at least a decade. Maybe more. But that was going to change. On July 26, 2017, Joseph stayed up to greet his birth moment at 3:45 a.m. He was at least 1,800 miles from Oak Grove, long ago having moved to the East Coast in hopes of becoming someone. But there in that room surrounded by long deferred and ignored dreams, as he reread the Mother Goose poem for the millionth time, Joseph Mincer was reborn. In a rush of tears and inspiration on his birthday, a day he hated consequently, Joseph threw open his laptop, rushed to Google, and began reinvesting himself into that old self, that loving and giving self, navigating to various philanthropic institutions near him. He had to do something. Within a half hour, he had 9 separate days reserved to serve soup, knock down walls, sort clothes, and tutor some kids in biology, and that was just in the next 2 weeks. The act of signing up for those days of service made his heart swell, made him feel more acutely everything. The service itself, well, hell, that just might save his soul. Come hell or high water, in the name of Aunt Deidre, Jenny, Jay, his entire family, and everyone he'd ever given less than his best to, this Friday's child would take control again. Thank you for listening to Friday's Child. All musical tracks in the background of this story come from freesound.org. The tracks are all being used under CC 1.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. Please head over to freesound.org to check out some amazing artists at work. Or, if you're feeling up to it, start an account and start sharing your sounds today. Next up are the combined parts 9 and 10 of Jack Lee's novella, Ants of the Fire, The Legend of Tilo. If you've not listened to parts 1 through 8 just yet, please go back and get in on the beginning of the story so you're not lost. For those that are all caught up, let's go see what that rebellious drone is up to.